Hello everyone, Devin here, and I'm just coming to you with a presentation that I think really strongly and biblically affirms that the third coming of Christ will take place in the year 2033. As always, my studies are fast. They go through a lot of information that you may need to slow down, pause the video, look things up, study for yourself in order to really get the benefit from this. We're going to be looking at some timelines, a little bit complicated, but I think not too bad. And to me, this is hugely confirming. It's based on really three fundamental concepts: that Israel entered the Promised Land between 1457 BC and 1449 BC. And this idea is from Bible chronology, just following through the unbroken chain of chronological verses to be found in Scripture and discovering where all the BC dates fall on these special events throughout history. Now, this is a huge study, and we're not going to go into that. I'm going to provide a link, though, to my big study in the description box, my study regarding Bible chronology. I'm really excited about that study, so I hope you can go check that out, download that, and study that for yourself. But what I believe is that Israel entered the Promised Land between 1457 and 1449 BC. Now, that's based on my own study of Bible chronology. However, I understand that not everyone sees it that way. Not everyone has done that study. And so I have considered, what do other students of the Bible see regarding the date of the entry of Israel into the Promised Land? And the date that people are talking about is somewhere around 1400 BC, right at the turn of the century. Now, of course, nobody would say they know for certain the exact year that Israel entered the Promised Land. That is so long ago, we can't be totally certain of the exact year. But somewhere right there around the turn of the century, 1400 BC. So we're going to consider that possibility. And then we're also going to consider the possibility that what really matters is that modern Zionist Jews began to enter Promised Land in a major immigration wave in modern times, back actually in 1882. So these three possibilities are sort of the foundation for our consideration, and we're going to look at how that works. Now, in Leviticus 25, verse 2 through 10, you're going to see that God gives instruction to Israel, saying, "When ye come into the land which I give you, thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years unto thee, 7 times 7 years, and the space of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be unto thee 49 years. Then shalt thou cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month, in the day of atonement. Ye shall make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. And ye shall hallow the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a Jubilee unto you." So I have a slide here showing how to count Jubilee periods and note Jubilee years. Please notice here that the 50th year, of course, is always the Jubilee year, but it's also the first year of a new Jubilee period. So this means that whenever you have N plus 1 Jubilee periods, you're going to have N Jubilees in those periods. So N Jubilee years. Please note the distinction between Jubilee years, that would be the 50th year, and Jubilee periods. This is the period of 49 years leading up to another Jubilee year, or 50th year. So it's very fascinating. This is just an arithmetic fact that if Israel entered the Promised Land 1457 through 1449 BC, then 71 Jubilee periods later brings us to somewhere in 2023 through 2031 AD. Now we know that the Shemitah year that falls inside that period, 2023 through 2031, is 2029. So the 2029 is the end of a 7th year. We know that from what Jews understand. Well, actually, Jonathan Cahn has popularized this understanding that 2022 was a Shemitah year, 2029 will be the next Shemitah year, 2015 was one, 2008, 2001, and these were also major economic collapses in the American stock market. So, if the Shemitah year is 2029, that has to be the year this 49-year period is ending as well, right? And that would mean the actual date, the exact date that Israel entered the Promised Land is 1451 BC. Because it has to be 71 Jubilee periods before that. Now that's just arithmetic. That is solid as a rock, just based on the assumption that yes, 2029 AD is the Shemitah year, which I think we can assume, and then just the arithmetic for where that would put the entry of Israel to the Promised Land. Now what's so fascinating about this is there's a very beautiful 30-40 divide in this 70 Jubilees. So 71 Jubilee periods contain 70 Jubilees. There's 30 Jubilees in the period leading up to the year in which Jerusalem fell to the Romans. And then there's 40 Jubilees in the period leading up to the fall of 2029. Now this 30-40 division is very interesting. You see it all over Revelation actually. There's many sevens in Revelation. 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 last plagues. And in all of those sevens, you're going to find either a 4-3 division or a 3-4 division, a very natural division. For example, in the seals, you have 4 horses. These are the first 4 seals, and then the rest of the seals are not horses. In the trumpets, you have 4 trumpets, and then the last 3 trumpets are woes. So there's definitely this 3-4 division or 4-3 division. And the life of David. David actually lived for 30 years. He was 30 years old when he became king, and then he reigned for 40 years, and he died when he was 70 years old. I think that's very interesting. It's very interesting how 30 years old was actually the age of adulthood where Jews entered their ministry or their work. Joseph, he became Tate of Egypt when he was 30 years old. Levites, they all entered the ministry of the sanctuary only once they were 30 years old. David, of course, became king when he was 30 years old. Jesus entered his ministry at 30 years of age. And of course, 70 years is the biblical generation. This is a typical lifespan, according to David, actually. So, very interesting that we've got 70 Jubilees inside a period. Yeah, there's this 30 Jubilees in the first period, 40 Jubilees in the second period, and the divider is this incredibly important event for the Jews, which was the destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, and the disbanding of Jews from the Promised Land. They were scattered all over the world. Major watershed moment. Now, let's consider, what if this whole thing about Bible chronology doesn't quite get us the right date for the entry of Israel into the Promised Land? What if the real date is what scholars think sometime around 1400 BC? Well, in that case, we could choose the date 1402 BC. Why not? Because we don't know the exact year for sure. And if we chose that date for the entry of Israel to the Promised Land, that brings us to the same ending point 70 Jubilee periods later. There's 69 Jubilees in that period of 70 Jubilee periods. Now this is also very interesting because that would make the year in which Jerusalem fell the 30th Jubilee, and it would make the year following the fall of 2029 the 70th Jubilee. And then let's deal with the possibility that Jubilee periods only accrue when Jews are in the Promised Land. So it's a fact that the first Aliyah, or wave of migration of Zionist Jews into Palestine, began in the year 1882. And, of course, the difference between 1882 and 2029 is 147 years, which is divisible by 49. Gives you 3 periods, 3 Jubilee periods. That is interesting. So this year 2029, it really fits everything quite beautifully, actually. Yeah, let's just review. You either have 70 Jubilee periods with 29 Jubilees in the first period, 40 Jubilees in the second period, if you start this whole count from 1402 BC, or you have a period containing 70 Jubilee years if you start from the date 1451 BC. And now here's where things get really interesting. What is the similarity between the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD and the year 2029? There's a very interesting prophecy about the fall of Jerusalem. Jesus said, "So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, let the reader understand." So this was an interesting point Jesus made, because he was talking about the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Very clearly he was referring to that event. However, the prophecy he was referring to is well known to refer to the middle of the tribulation. This is where the Antichrist is going to confirm covenant. The tribulation is where he confirms a covenant for 1 week, but in the middle of that week, he's going to cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So there's going to be this overspreading of abominations. He's going to make the temple desolate. How does he do that? He is going to cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. And this reminds me of the verse 2 Thessalonians 2:4. The Antichrist, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. This is definitely parallel to how the Romans came in to the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD and destroyed it. So really, same prophecy is referring both to the 30 Jubilee mark and the 70 Jubilee mark. Incredible. I think this is powerful evidence that, yes, the year 2029 is the center of the tribulation period, which would mean spring 2026 is the beginning of the tribulation period, and the spring of 2033 is the third coming of Christ. It works perfectly. And really, guys, this is all just arithmetic, with us noting some interesting biblical facts based on the understanding that 2029 is the Shemitah, and that you have these various possibilities for where to start your count of Jubilee periods. Either 1451 or 1402 or 1882 AD. So I hope this was a blessing to you. I hope you learned something and can think about this clearly. I think it's really powerful evidence, biblical evidence, that Jesus is coming the third time in the spring of 2033.